The 30th of January, 1933. Adolf Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany and moves quickly to turn the country into a one-party dictatorship. To achieve his goals, the Führer also relies on terror. Soon, tens of thousands of young, jobless Nazi men put on the brown shirts and high leather boots and take to the streets to beat up and even kill some opponents of the new regime. Mere fear pressures into silence other Germans who do not support the Nazis. In March 1933, less than 2 months after Hitler became the Chancellor, the Nazis established the first regular concentration camp, Dachau. Out of over 200,000 people who will be imprisoned in Dachau and in the numerous subsidiary camps during its 12-year existence between 1933 and 1945, nearly 42,000 will be murdered. When American soldiers liberate Dachau on the 29th of April 1945, they are so shocked and horrified with the level of brutality and degradation that they proceed to take brutal action against the camp's SS personnel. The Dachau liberation reprisals end up with the brutal killing of the Nazi SS guards by both their new American captors, as well as the former prisoners, who want nothing but revenge. Dachau concentration camp was located on the grounds of an abandoned munitions factory near the northeastern part of the town of Dachau, about 10 miles northwest of Munich in southern Germany. The first prisoner transports arrived at the camp on the 22nd of March, 1933. In October the same year, Dachau's commandant, Theodor Eicke, introduced a system of regulations which inflicted brutal punishments on prisoners for the slightest offenses. Eicke ensured that the Dachau camp served as a model for all later concentration camps. It also became a training center or a school of violence for SS guards who were deployed throughout the concentration camp system. During the first year, the camp had a capacity of 5,000 prisoners. Initially, the internees were primarily German communists, social democrats, trade unionists, and other political opponents of the Nazi regime. However, over time, other groups were also interned at Dachau, such as Jehovah's Witnesses, Roma and Sinti people, gay men, repeat criminal offenders, as well as asocials, whom the regime incarcerated because they could not or would not find gainful employment. During the early years, relatively few Jews were interned in Dachau. The number of Jewish prisoners in the camp rose with the increased persecution of Jews. On the 10th and 11th of November 1938, in the aftermath of the Kristallnacht pogrom, when Jewish homes, businesses, synagogues, hospitals and schools were ransacked by the Nazi SA and German civilians, almost 11,000 Jewish men were interned there. Most of the men in this group were released after incarceration of a few weeks to a few months, many after providing they had made arrangements to emigrate from Germany. The camp was divided into 2 sections: the camp area and the crematoria area. The camp area consisted of 32 barracks. The courtyard between the prison and the central kitchen was used for the summary execution of prisoners. An electrified barbed wire fence, a ditch, and a wall with 7 guard towers surrounded the camp. After the Second World War began, on the 1st of September 1939, living conditions for the prisoners in the Dachau concentration camp drastically worsened. The murderous working conditions, the insufficient rations, and the lack of hygiene facilities in the camp led to a soaring death rate. From 1940, more and more prisoners were transported to the Dachau concentration camp from other countries, occupied by the German armed forces. In 1942, the crematorium area was constructed next to the main camp. It included the old crematorium and the new crematorium with a gas chamber. However, there is no credible evidence that the gas chamber was used to murder human beings. Instead, prisoners underwent selection, and those who were judged too sick or weak to continue working were sent to the Hartheim Euthanasia Killing Center near Linz in Austria. More than 2,500 Dachau prisoners were murdered in the gas chambers at Hartheim. In addition, mass executions by shooting took place, first in the bunker courtyard and later in a specially designed SS shooting range. Thousands of Dachau prisoners were murdered there, including at least 4,000 Soviet prisoners of war following the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. Beginning in 1942, German physicians performed medical experiments on prisoners in Dachau. Physicians and scientists from the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, and the German Experimental Institute for Aviation conducted high-altitude and hypothermia experiments, as well as experiments to test methods for making seawater potable. These efforts aimed to aid German pilots who conducted bombing raids or who were downed in icy waters. German scientists also carried out experiments to test the efficacy of pharmaceuticals against diseases like malaria and tuberculosis. Hundreds of prisoners died or were harmed as a result of these experiments. Dachau prisoners were used as forced laborers. At first, they were employed in the operation of the camp, in various construction projects, and in small handicraft industries established in the camp. Prisoners built roads, worked in gravel pits, and drained marshes. During the war, forced labor using concentration camp prisoners became increasingly important to German armaments production. In the summer and fall of 1944, to increase war production, satellite camps under the administration of Dachau were established near armaments factories throughout southern Germany. Dachau alone had some 140 subcamps, mainly in southern Bavaria where prisoners worked almost exclusively in armaments works. Thousands of prisoners were worked to death. However, it was Dachau's final 4 months of operation between January and April 1945 that proved to be catastrophic. Between 2,600 and 4,000 inmates per month died, roughly 100 every day. Because the camp was suffering from a coal shortage since late 1944, the crematoria could not keep pace with the tempo of deaths. As a result, the SS personnel at Dachau forced prisoners to bring the dead to a hill located close to the camp and bury them in a pit. As Allied forces advanced toward Germany, German officials began to move prisoners from concentration camps near the front to prevent the capture of intact camps and their prisoners. Transports from the evacuated camps in the east arrived continuously at Dachau, resulting in a dramatic deterioration of conditions. After days of travel, with little or no food or water, the prisoners arrived weak and exhausted, often near death. Typhus epidemics became a serious problem due to overcrowding, poor sanitary conditions, insufficient provisions, and the weakened state of the prisoners. With more than 30,000 prisoners, the camp was dramatically overcrowded. Barracks built to house 200 prisoners were jammed with more than 1,600. Of some 41,500 persons who lost their lives between 1933 and 1945, over 1/3 died during the final 6 months of the war. By mid-April 1945, absolute chaos ruled inside Dachau. Because Commandant Eduard Weiter underwent a nervous breakdown, Berlin called in Martin Weiss, the former commandant from 1942 to 1943, with a reputation for benevolence among the inmates, to restore some semblance of order and discipline. However, restoring order and discipline proved an impossible task for Weiss. On the 26th of April, 1945, there were 67,665 registered prisoners in Dachau and its subcamps. More than half of this number were in the main camp. As Allied units approached, at least 25,000 prisoners from the Dachau camp system were forced to march south or were transported away from the camps in freight trains. During these so-called death marches, the Germans shot anyone who could no longer continue. Many also died of starvation, hypothermia, or exhaustion. On the 29th of April 1945, the Dachau main camp was liberated by units of the 45th Infantry Division. Before the US soldiers arrived in Dachau, the camp's commandant, Martin Weiss, had already fled. However, there were still SS guards left in the camp, and Nazi guards in the camp's gate tower even foolishly fired upon the liberators. But when the American soldiers opened fire in return, they came down with their hands held in the air. After the SS guards surrendered, the US troops further inspected the camp. Though these troops had experienced extensive combat, were battle-hardened, and had endured thousands of casualties, none of their prior combat experiences prepared them for what lay ahead. The first clue that something was terribly wrong was the smell. As they neared the camp, the American soldiers found a train comprised of about 40 cars filled with bodies in various states of decomposition. It was the moment when they understood the origin of the smell. It was the overpowering stench of death. Private John Lee later recalled, We had seen men in battle blown apart, burned to death, and die many different ways. But we were never prepared for this. Several of the dead lay there with their eyes open, a picture I will never get out of my mind. It seems they were looking at us and saying, "What took you so long?" Some of the prisoners had been shot. Lieutenant William Cowling, who took part in the liberation of Dachau, later recalled, "I couldn't even talk. It made us sick to our stomach, and so mad we could do nothing but clench our fists." However, some other US soldiers, such as Lieutenant William Walsh, who had already seen some 500 days of combat, descended into a blind fury against the German personnel in Dachau. When 4 German officers emerged from the woods holding up a white handkerchief, Lieutenant Walsh marched them into one of the boxcars, which were littered with corpses, and shot them with a pistol. When the mortally wounded Germans cried out in agony, another American officer finished the job. Later, it only got worse. Inside the camp, they found even more dead bodies, often naked, lying where they had fallen in the last few hours or days before the camp's liberation. Sometimes the bodies were stacked on top of one another like firewood. For many soldiers, seeing these atrocities gave the war a new meaning. They realized that they were not just fighting an enemy, but they were fighting pure evil itself. The Nazis had tried to cremate as many of these bodies as they could before abandoning Dachau, but there were simply too many of them. One soldier later remembered, "Everywhere you turn is just the horror of bodies, and people near death or in a state of complete decrepitude that you cannot even process it." While many of the American soldiers broke down in sobs, others were filled with rage, anger, and hatred. As one of the Dachau liberators admitted 59 years later, after what they saw, they shot any German guards they saw on sight. About 7 German prisoners were shot at the camp's Tower B. Walsh then ordered his men to round up SS men and segregate prisoners of war into those who were members of the Wehrmacht, which were German armed forces, and those who were in the SS. The SS were marched to a coal yard where the US soldiers ordered them to line up along the wall by the guard tower. Lieutenant Walsh then yelled, "Let them have it," and the US soldiers opened fire with rifles, pistols, and the .30 caliber machine gun. After a 30-second flurry of gunfire, the Nazi guards were killed on the spot. However, even this was not the end. American troops also killed Germans who had given up elsewhere in the camp. William Krakow, who served as a scout with heavy weapons, recalled seeing a dead German soldier. When Krakow looked into the wallet of the dead man, he saw a photograph in which the dead Nazi was tugging on the ear of a Jewish man with a pair of tongs. He was laughing in the photograph and torturing the Jew with sheer sadistic enjoyment. American soldiers continued searching the camp, and upon finding a dog kennel with German shepherds and Doberman pinschers, they shot the animals. Rumors circulated that the Germans had fed political prisoners to these dogs. The prisoners themselves, many of them tortured and treated as nothing but animals all these years, also got their revenge. While all the prisoners had lost at least some family members, some of them had to watch their wives being abused and raped. Others witnessed shooting competitions in which SS members threw small children in the air while others shot at them. Others saw their friends slowly die of starvation or during the death marches which occurred shortly before the liberation. Some inmates swore to all that was sacred to them that if they could ever kill their SS guards, they would not hesitate. And they didn't. American soldiers allowed, and sometimes even encouraged the inmates to carry out retribution against their former captors, and SS men, capos, and informers were beaten badly with fists, sticks, and shovels. The prisoners' revenge started when they caught the SS guards, and one of them elbowed one of the 2 inmates out of his way. The prisoners knocked the guards down and killed them all. As one American soldier later said, "We stood aside and watched while these guards were beaten to death, beaten so badly that their bodies were ripped open and innards protruded. We watched with less feeling than if a dog were being beaten. In truth, it might be said that we were completely without feeling. Deep anger and hate had temporarily numbed our emotions." There was at least one incident where US soldiers looked away as 2 prisoners beat a German guard to death with a shovel. One American soldier witnessed an inmate stomping on an SS trooper's face until, as he later said, there wasn't much left. When the soldier said to him, "You've got a lot of hate in your heart," the prisoner simply nodded. An American chaplain was told by 3 young Jewish men who had left the camp during liberation that they had beaten to death one of the more sadistic SS guards when they discovered him hiding in a barn and dressed as a peasant. An American doctor, 30-year-old Captain David Wilsey, penned a 7-page letter to his wife Emily describing the reprisals. Wilsey stated that he did not feel a single disturbed emotion at witnessing the killing of Nazis, whom he saw as beasts who deserved to be slaughtered. To this day, it is unclear how many SS guards were killed, but it is estimated that the number is between 30 and 50. The irony in all this was that when the Americans liberated Dachau, most of the camp's regular guards had already fled the camp. The SS men whom the outraged American troops were shooting down in Dachau were Waffen-SS, who had been transferred from the Eastern Front just days before, and their specific purpose in the camp was to surrender it to the Western Allies. The Waffen-SS was the military branch of the SS. After the liberation, American troops forced the German citizens of the town of Dachau to come to the camp to see for themselves the conditions there and to help bury the dead bodies. They claimed, "We did not know what was going on." However, some did not deny that they knew about the atrocities and simply said, "What could we do?" Because General Patton, then military governor of Bavaria, dismissed all the charges, no one has ever stood trial before the court for this reprisal. The conclusion of the Army Inspector General's report was, German soldiers after their surrender as prisoners of war to the American troops were summarily shot and killed by such troops. The whole incident remained unknown to the public until the 1980s. Out of over 200,000 people who were imprisoned in Dachau, and in the numerous subsidiary camps during its 12-year existence between 1933 and 1945, nearly 42,000 people were murdered. There were many tears shed for the victims of the Dachau concentration camp. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.